Installation and Design Experience Coverings 2019. I can't believe it, it's day 3. Where does the time go, right? So much great stuff to do at Coverings, and we're glad you're back for this gauge porcelain tile and panel demonstration. I'm here with my fellow trainer, Rob Roderick with the NTCA, Randy Fleming with the NTCA, and I'm Mark Heinlein with the NTCA. We're here working today with Lupe Ortiz. Lupe?
Hi everybody. My name is Lupe Ortiz, and I am with IMI IMTEF, which is the International Masonry Training and Education Foundation, and I'm here to work with this great team on showing all of you guys how to properly install a gauge porcelain tile / panel.
That's a lot for you to say.
It's a lot.
That's a lot for me to say,
yes.
too. That's a lot for anybody to say. That's why I call this stuff GPTP. And I've heard some people, Lupe, call this stuff a super format and whatever.
Thin tile,
all these
panels.
different names. Can you explain why it's called what it is?
So the reason why it's called gauge porcelain tile now is because, of course, when we first started with this, when the tile started coming out here, we used to call it thin porcelain tile. Well, thin because it's very thin, as low as 1/8 of an inch thick. And so when we came up with the standard was developed, and it's gauge porcelain tile because it is gauge. It goes from a nominal dimension of 3 millimeters up to 6 or even up to 12 millimeters. So we get into the different categories, and that's why they call it a gauge porcelain tile. Of course, now we get into dimensions, right? We got anywhere from 1 meter to 3 meters, from 1.5 meter to 3 meters. So they get very big, and that's where the gauge porcelain tile comes, and the panels, because once it gets past the 1 meter mark, then it just became a panel.
That's right. So if you have a piece of this gauged stuff, that's the thickness that Lupe was talking about, a couple of different thicknesses. That's the gauged part of this. The tile part is a piece that's 1 square meter in any dimension, right? Just 1 square meter or less. That's the tile. The panel, that's like this bigger stuff that we're setting here today. So gauged porcelain tile, panels, and slabs. We threw that in there. So I refer to it as GPTP. And that's what's described right here in this document. And what this document is ANSI A108.19 and ANSI A137.3. And I'll tell you what that means. The A137.3 part, that's the manufacturer's specifications for creating this tile and panel. So the manufacturers have some specifications, some standards to make sure that they manufacture this product consistently, right? They're always consistent, and we can trust them and rely on them when they meet this standard, this manufacturing specification. That A108.19 part, I'm going to have Lupe tell you about a little bit.
The A108.19, basically that's the installation standard. This is actually the first time, Mark, I believe, that the installation and the actual product standard are on the same book. And the reason why, I mean, it's so little, and that's why we have both on this one. So the installation, we get into the details all the way down from the substrate prep, the handling, the cutting, the drilling, the embedding of the tile, and what and how you should go about dealing with, bad substrates. You get the walls that, unfortunately, they don't grow straight trees anymore. So, the walls are kind of in and out, or the floors may have unevenness, where we're not hitting our substrate tolerances. So all of those tips are in here under the A108.19 installation standard.
That's right, and this is a step-by-step installation guide. You need this guide to make sure that you're installing it correctly. And very soon, we're going to show you some of those steps for installing a panel correctly on a wall substrate, a vertical substrate. And we'll be installing a panel right next to the one we installed yesterday. Who was here yesterday and saw us install one on the wall? Anybody? Okay, a couple of repeat people.
4.
How about the one on the floor? Anybody seen that one? All right, great. Well, this is that next and final step in the process. So the first step is looking at our job site. Now this stuff, like Lupe said, is large, and you need some specialty tools to handle it, right? So The tools that we have devices like this, we have specialty trowels, which we'll discuss more in a minute, and we have this device over here that Randy is guarding. And this tool right here is a frame or a rack, and it's got all of these suction cups. We've seen people before all of these tools were really invented to try to use 2x4s and duct tape and all this stuff to try to pick up these panels and maneuver them and get them around. Well, that's not the right way to do it, because you need the proper tool to grab the panel, to maneuver it, and get it installed on the substrate correctly. Lupe, what are the major components of that tool?
The major components, as far as these tools, we don't have anybody from Gullah
No,
today.
we don't today. No.
Yeah. So here we have basically your suction cups. This right here, it's one of the biggest. This is critical for these panels because these suction cups right here, they all consist of a pump system. What this pump system, it's hard to see from where you guys are at, but because this thing is kind of upside down in a way.
We'll spin it around.
We're going to spin it around and then you'll see. But the suction cup, what it does, it has a pump that we got to put pressure in here. And once that little line disappears, that it shows you exactly the amount of pressure that it's for that suction cup to bond and basically lock the tile, that allows it for us to move it. So it's consisting of 6 different suction cups. It's got the middle rail, which this middle rail right here, eventually once we move the panel and get it off the A-frame and put it onto the sawhorses, we'll remove these arms, and now these handles are going to be placed in the middle to where Randy and I are going to be able to grab it from the sawhorses, and instead of trying to get under the tile to get it up the wall, we will be able to get it from the side and make it a lot easier for us to just come in here and place the legs on the floor and tilt it. So right here, this is the area that is going to be placed on the floor. Basically, this is the legs. The legs allow you to adjust so that we can get the edge of the tile to within 1/4 or 3/8 of an inch away from the outside edge of this, and that's to protect the tile edge from not getting chipped.
Lupe just did a great quick, very great explanation of the steps that you're going to see here. And so what we're going to do to bond this tile to the wall properly, we'll use that tool, attach it to a panel, bring it over here, lay it on its front on the sawhorses with the back exposed, and we'll actually take these specialty trowels and we'll comb the mortar on the back of the panel. And while we're doing that, we will also comb the mortar on our substrate, right? And that's what we'll need then to bring that panel together and embed it and have those combed ridges. You'll see us focusing very carefully to make sure that we comb those ridges so they come together like this, lock together, the air releases, and we have the bond we need. The bond we need underneath there is 80% coverage for every square foot of tile. Every 12 by 12 section of tile, we need at least 80% coverage with no voids greater than 2 square inches. Did I say that right, Lupe?
Yes, you did. Unfortunately, that 2 square inches marks means, okay, we get into a lot of different numbers here, but when we comb the mortar, we end up with ridges. So those ridges is those little gaps in between, and you have to combine that to come up to the 2 square inch mark.
Right.
That doesn't mean that we can have a big old square 2 inches with no thin set. That would not be good. So that means that we're going to find it all, add it all up, and we're going to have to come up with that number.
So doing everything correctly is necessary to make sure we have the right bond coat coverage. So
yeah.
What do you have there?
So right here, why do we need a speed square right here? And the reason I have this right here, it's how do we get to the mortar coverage required like Mark was explaining right now? Well, one of them is, and the reason I just like to show this is to actually show the proper angle that should always be used when we comb mortar, regardless if it's a gauge porcelain panel or a plank tile or 20 by 24 tile, and it's basically holding it at this angle. So if I'm going to go ahead and this is my substrate, that means I'm holding the trowel at this angle. So if I hold the trowel at that angle at all times, I am making this the right dimension that it's supposed to be. So if I have a 3/8 notch trowel or medium, like this sizes are large, the specialty trowels, that's the only way I'm going to get that coverage required that you're talking about. That means I'm going to have to always, when I'm combing the mortar, hold that trowel at that right angle. As long as I can maintain consistency of that, and how do I go about doing that? Locking that wrist. You lock your wrist. Other thing that works for me is I like to sometimes put my thumb on the outside, and that tends to lock it. If I hear, you see how my angle changed? As soon as I put my thumb on the outside, it just kind of goes forward. So in a way, it locks it. It's kind of weird how it works, right? I go here and everything relaxes. I go this way and it just locks. So if I do this all the time, I use a rocking motion when I'm combing the mortar, and I maintain consistency because this is locked, that's locked. I come back and stays the same angle throughout.
Perfect demonstration, and we'll demonstrate that for you live in just a couple seconds. One final point I want to make is that we've got some mortar mixed up, and we're going to use some special mortar. Not just any old mortar can be used to mount these panels. We have to use what's called an ANSI A118.15 mortar. The one we're using today is this particular one right here. See if I can get it. This guy right here, and that is a specialty mortar. It's got some special properties like, oh, I don't know, thixotropic, right? Which means that when it's vibrated or shaken, the molecules in that mortar kind of vibrate and they move together and they flow together to take out all that air and fill those voids Lupe described. That's important. We also need that highly improved modified thin set to make sure that we had the adhesion and the coverage beneath the tile. So what you hear going on back there, we've pre-mixed our mortar. Randy is in our mixing station remixing it. So we measure the water correctly. We read the instructions on the back of the bag. Watch this, check this out. This is an awesome thing. Guess what's back there? Instructions. These instructions tell us how much water to use, the speed to mix it at, how long to mix it, how long to let it rest or slake, and that's what Randy did back there, and how long to mix it. So we've done that, we've got our mortar available, and once we have all of the pieces in place, you should be able to, with your experienced team, following the instructions in that book I showed you, install one of these about every 20 minutes. And as you go through the day, you're installing these at the clip of 20 minutes each, you're making money, right? And you're getting a great job done. Sound about right?
Yes, that's right. Would you like to explain why we have a microfiber towel here?
I would. This microfiber towel is a key element in this whole business. All of those suction cups Lupe pointed out have to be clean to make sure that they can grab that panel. The panel itself has to be very clean. So what Randy is doing over there, he's got a very slightly damp microfiber towel and he's cleaning the surface of that panel. Rob, we're dividing and conquering because we're good tile contractors. He's cleaning those suction cups. And even though they're brand spanking new, they've been sitting across the hall at the vendor's booth, people touching them, maybe a little dust in the air, and it would serve as a bond breaker. Just like that dust and dirt Randy got off the front of that panel.
This is the front of the panel. Basically, this is where the suction cups have to be bonded to. The back of the tile, it has a mesh. So this is going to hold even more dust. So this is all transportation dust, basically, and sometimes everything that went on around here during the setup. But this is why it's important to clean it up. This is all a bond breaker. It ain't no different than bonding, the mortar into your wall or floor. If we do not take all this dust off, there will be a failure. That means we do not want to lose that tile.
That's right. Okay, let's get this thing connected up, guys. All right, what we've got here is we've got these sawhorses positioned, and they're positioned right in front of the wall where we're going to be standing this panel up. Lupe's spinning the cart around so he can position the tool to get it connected to the panel. And we've already pre-sized, pre-adjusted the position of the suction cups on the tool so that it aligns with the size of the panel that we have today. The panel size that we have is roughly 39 5/8 inches wide, about a meter wide, right? And it's cut to 7 feet 6 inches long. The reason we cut it to 7 feet 6 inches long for this demonstration is we constructed an 8-foot high wall. So we wanted to give you a little bit of sense of scale with what's going on. So it's cut to 7/6. Originally, the length of this panel was 118 inches. So we cut a couple of feet off the thing, right? So what they're doing now is they know that can you guys see this all right? I want to make sure you can see this because this is important stuff right here.
Good.
Over here on this side, the panel they set yesterday, if you can see in there, it has a 1/4 inch red horseshoe shim under it. And why they did that is they set it 1/4 of an inch off of our floor panel like this. And the reason is walls move, floors move, buildings move, and we need to have a soft joint, a movement joint in there at every change in plane. This floor is a plane, that wall is a plane. So where the two meet, there's movement. We have to accommodate that. We don't ever want a hard tile between the two. We don't ever want a hard grout. We want a nice open joint in there. No cured mortar, no dried mortar. So what we just did here is these guys used that speed square to measure from the bottom of the panel. The bottom of the panel is the short end that's toward me, and there's some little feet on the bottom of the tool. And they were able to spin those in and spin them out until they were 3/8 of an inch from the bottom of the foot to the bottom of the panel. And if I'm not making sense, I think you'll see what I mean when we stand this up, and then we're able to get a 1/4 inch horseshoe shim under there, and it'll drop down 1/8 of an inch onto that horseshoe shim. Does that make any sense? Okay, so that's what they're doing there right now. They've used that high dollar carpenter square, probably $1.98, to transfer the measurement from the bottom of the tile to the bottom of the foot. They did a rough calculation when they first applied the suction cups. Now they're doing fine tuning. When they applied the suction cups, you saw them working with the pumps to gain the suction. There's a gauge on every one of those suction cups that they can tell that there is suction. There's also a red line. If we see that red line on that plunger, that means it's lost its suction. So the last thing we do before we move that, Lupe and Randy have just done this very critical point, is they've checked to make sure each individual suction cup has adhered. Now they're talking between each other. And what they've done is they've just pantomimed the movements that they will make to lift that panel to get it positioned on the sawhorses correctly. Sir, Lupe?
So real quick, if you don't mind, Mark. So the thing is, the handling of the rack is very critical, the positioning of the hands. Randy and I are going to carry this panel all the way over here, but I got to be careful that when I grab the end of the rack, I'm making sure that I grab it the right way, because if I hold it this way, just because it's here, I'm going to go this way, I got to drop it, and I'm going to be all twisted. So my hands need to switch, so that way we can place it in place. Randy has to think the same way. All right, so we're going to take it on 3.
Could you guys demonstrate now that you've explained that? Could you pantomime?
Yeah, so now my hands are here. So Randy, you're going to back up. I'm going to swing this way, and by having my hands here, I can bring it over, place it, and now I go like this.
Simple, right?
Easy.
But if they had their hands backwards, they'd get over here, and it's too late to figure it out. Okay, great job, guys. You know, when I was here during the construction of all these vignettes next to us,
on 3,
the
1, 2,
companies
3.
that did this, that's exactly what they did for every one of those panels that were installed. So what I'm doing here now, we're going to tilt that up, bring it flat, and yeah, guys, you're good. Bring it on the sawhorses, you're perfect. We want to have a third set of eyes down beneath there because they're just guessing, and we don't want it to slip and drop to the floor. So now what we have is we've got the back of this panel exposed, and right away, Rob is cleaning the back of that panel with a slightly damp microfiber trowel. All right, and Rob is supporting that panel with his free hand as he moves along. You can see that right there. He's very careful to keep he's right-handed, so he's very careful to keep his left hand under there supporting this, because if he puts a little pressure on there, we don't want to crack that panel. They are a little bit fragile. This mesh material is a type of material that's designed to give it more strength. We've carefully selected the mortar from the manufacturer that we're going to be installing this with to make sure that it is what's the word? It's compatible with the mesh on the back of the panel. All right, so the panel manufacturer and the mortar manufacturer, we referred to their charts and it said, yes, these two products align. So we paid attention to the manufacturer instructions. What these guys are doing now, they're applying these handles because when we lift this off, they're going to have to probably have something to grab onto when we put it up on the wall, right? So they're adding some legs, and you guys are going to use these things?
I'm not going to use the ones on this side. I got enough room. Randy, they'll be sticking out too far for me. No, we're good.
Yeah, when you get them both in for the size of the space we have, it's getting to be a little much. They're pre-calculating all this. We don't want to find that out when we're in position, okay? So all of that planning, all of that prep makes sense to do it now. That's why they're talking about this thing. All right, now Lupe, you want to tell us what you're doing there?
So now I'm adding the mortar onto the tile. Now that I saw that Rob cleaned it, I know it's clean, so now we're going to go ahead and start adding the mortar onto the tile so that we can actually key it into the back of the substrate, on the back of the tile. We want to make sure that we lock it into place because of all this mesh. So I'll let Rob do a little demonstration of how to properly...
Get that out of your way.
No, that's good.
Do you want a pile on there?
I got it.
You got it?
Thank you.
Okay, all right. Sometimes what we see, and what I was asking Lupe is, we'll have a third team member because we got to get almost a full bag of mortar on here. And we'll get people up here holding the buckets so they can scoop the mortar out, whatever works best. While we're doing this, we've got Randy over here working on the wall. Now let me ask you this question. Who do you think is going to finish first? The panel guys or the wall guy? The panel guys. Panel guys. They're going to get done first. Now this is an important element to note because we don't want our thin set open and skinning over, too long, right? We don't want it open too long and skinning over before we marry up those two, the wall to the panel. So we want to make sure that Rob and Lupe don't beat Randy to the punch up here, right? Now Randy's a great contractor, he knows what he's doing, but it's going to take a little bit longer to do that. So what he's doing is he's keying that mortar into the back of the wall, getting it keyed in. These guys are getting this keyed in over here, and they're getting it ready to work. So let's watch what Rob and Lupe are doing here. They're going to get up more mortar on the back of the panel now that they have it all keyed in, and they're going to take the gauged side of their trowel, that fancy, funny-looking side that every trowel has. A trowel is nothing but a gauge, and like Lupe described, we have to hold it at a 45-degree angle. And they're just going to put it down in any motion, kind of like Lupe's doing here, just to get enough material on the back of the panel.
Yeah, everybody is always so concerned about trying to be perfect at the beginning when you're coming the mortar onto the tile. It doesn't necessarily have to happen. All we got to do is just put the tile into the mortar. We'll come back and dress it up at the end. I do have my hand just like Rob does on the outside edge of the tile, and that's just to protect it because we are putting a lot of pressure on the outside. We do not want to accidentally put too much pressure and then maybe crack the tile.
So we have two people working on the panel right now because working on the wall is a little bit crowded in this space. You want to take a look at your team and make sure that you've got all of your members assigned correctly and you're getting the most efficiency out of everybody working. Now, Lupe has pretty long arms, but he doesn't really have arms long enough to stretch across this entire panel without dragging his shirt through the mortar that's on there. That's no fun for anybody. The other thing that wouldn't happen is he wouldn't get that consistent 45-degree ridge across the entire panel. So these two guys are going to work as a team, marrying up their trowel marks right down the middle of the panel, and we call that the spine. Some people call it the zipper. It's the spine down the middle of the panel. And we want it to be roughly right about there to make sure that the air doesn't get trapped, that the air has an equal distance to travel from here out and from here out. If that spine was over here, that air would go fast, but this one would have a much longer way to go, right? So we're looking at the best practice to get this mortar installed.
So
what do you got here?
I got a mess.
Yeah.
Yeah. So basically, this is what we do not want to do. This is something that we see a lot. This is not recommended for this, type of installation. So right here, now that I have enough mortar on the tile, I'm going to go back and now I'm going to fix it. I'm going to dress it up. And that means I'm going to put my marks across the middle of the tile. I wasn't so concerned so much about the angle mark at the beginning because I just wanted to get the mortar on the tile. But if you notice, I do have some mortar on the tile. And that's because I want to make sure that I stay consistent, right? So now, like Mark was saying, and I was explaining earlier, that angle of the trowel. Now, I can't reach all the way, Mark. If I do, that's going to be really small and really high. So I'm reaching to the middle of the tile, and now I'm locking my wrist. I'm bringing that thumb out to the outside, and I'm rocking back. So now I get some mortar here, and I am going to get a little bit of mortar off the trowel because I know I have enough. I come back to the middle, lock it up, and pull back. Now I'm going to go ahead and dress it up.
I want you to watch Lupe, not the trowel. Watch him. Watch his body action. Look at how his wrist, his arm is locked, and he rocks his body backward, dragging the trowel with him at that very consistent angle.
So you see the mortar I just picked up. So now I'm going to switch over to the other side, and I'm going to clean this up.
So this time, now that you've watched his body motions, now you can alternate back and forth between watching his body and watching the trowel. And I want you to get this picture. You can use this for all of the tile you installed. This is really a great practice for every time you trowel. It's really the way to go for this stuff, but for every time you trowel, this is a great practice. Now, we're managing our personnel resources here, right? So after Rob and Lupe had this mortar gauged onto the panel, Rob jumped off. He went right over to Randy and helped Randy on the wall and helped him finish up and almost catch up to Lupe over here on the panel. So this is well thought out progress and planning. So what Randy has on the back is the same thing we had on the panel, just a little bit different. They gauged it all on. It looked all, swirly and everything, just the way we did not want it. Now, Randy is using that same body motion that Lupe showed us, and he's shifting his body from right to left, and he's working his way from top to bottom and just straightening out those lines. He's doing a great technique there, and it's looking beautiful.
So why did he smear so much thin set past the edge of that outside of the tile?
Lupe, that's a great point. Thanks for asking that.
Yeah.
So you see that blue tape above where Randy's troweling? So that blue tape up there goes along with a line that we put down the left side. Randy put mortar up over the top of that blue tape, and he put mortar all the way out to the left, right to that blue, or that line that you can't see, but we can. That allows the mortar to be spread in an area that's larger than the panel we're going to set. It's called the spread line. So we're spreading out a little bit more mortar than we need. We're spreading out 1 to 2 inches beyond the panel on every side where we're spreading mortar. And the reason is we want to make sure that we have mortar contact, that mortar coverage along the very critical edge of the panel, and especially the very critical corners of the panel, right? If this was on a floor and you step there, that's where we see a lot of breakage from non-supported tile. With this being on a wall, we need to make sure that we have full coverage there so our grout or our sealant doesn't get back in there too far. And if this was in a wet area, water could seep through there, would seep through there, and start collecting in those voids at the edge of the tile and at the corners. Does that make sense, guys? All right, great
So
question, Lupe.
what if I was to go ahead and try to clean this excess of thin set that's coming out the outside of the tile, and I just go ahead and do this just to clean this up?
You know, it looks pretty, but it's actually a very bad thing to do. Because you're blocking that airflow, Lupe, from this spine. The air that's got to travel from the center of this spine, it's got to get out here, out that open channel. And because Lupe's very clean in his work and his craft, he inadvertently blocked the flow of the air. He dammed it off. So that's not good, sir.
Okay, so I'm going to fix it up. So if I'll just open it like that.
Well, that's not good either, Lupe, because what we've done here is we've just blocked that airflow again. We've got to be very critical of our own troweling efforts to always make certain that we're achieving that straight line all the way.
Yeah,
to the edge.
therefore, for that reason, I went ahead and grabbed more mortar. So I always have to have enough mortar on my dry set, thin set, on my trowel so that I can come back and fix this. And I'm not just going to start right where I made that mess. I'm actually going to start from the middle and work my way out so that I can have consistency all the way through. So that means I'm going to come right back to the middle and fix this up and open up those channels that I had done at the beginning. Now here it's okay to do this because that's my outside edge. That's where my channel was at anyways.
Brilliant.
All right, thank you, Mark.
Yes, thank you, Lupe. Now, Randy's done on the wall. Lupe's done on the panel. Rob's been back and forth between the two because he's multi-talented. Now we have one more thing to do. We've got to check to make sure that this mortar over here, that was the last mortar touched longest time ago, hasn't skinned over. And I've got a little bit of transfer, Lupe, but not quite enough. What should we do?
Should we go ahead and...
Yeah, I'm not really getting any transfer.
You're not getting a lot?
Let's see what you get.
Yeah, I'm not getting a lot of transfer either. So there's two things. I see I got a lot of transfer. When I push down, I collapse that ridge. So that means I may have to go back and recomb the mortar on that side of the tile.
Yep.
Yeah.
So we were out here yammering a long time. So we're going to have to grab your trowel again and ask you to come back through and freshen that up before we set that panel.
That's okay.
This is an important step. We've done all this work, all of this procedure, and we want to, I'm still pressing here, this mortar has skinned over. I'm not getting any transfer. Go ahead,
again,
sir.
Bring mortar onto your trowel. Basically, I got to wake it up because it was falling asleep.
Yeah. Wake up that mortar. Mortar, wake up.
Again, you must maintain consistency of that wrist again and have enough mortar on that trowel. Now I got to move. So now I got to get this done because I don't want that mortar on the wall to, to fall asleep.
We don't want the wall mortar to skin over now. So we're getting a little bit of a, pendulum swinging back and forth. And where you combat this is you get the timing down for your whole team. You should be able to do this with 3 people very efficiently, but you have to be mindful of that clock and your mortar and all of these components. We could have another team member right now mixing the mortar for the next panel we're going to set. That way, that's all ready, the next panel gets hooked up, and now we're setting one panel every 20 minutes. Makes a lot of sense, right? Okay, we're just about done. I'm going to make one more safety point right here. I've been wearing these blue gloves, okay? These are nitrile gloves. They're okay for troweling and not getting mortar on my hands. But when it comes to handling the panels, we want to have some gloves like this. In fact, it's required. If these panels break for some reason, you flex it, it moves a little bit, and it cracks, very sharp. These protect your hands, and they're required. So what Lupe and Randy and Rob are doing right now is they're checking those suction cups again. They're checking those gauges. They're checking for the red lines on the plungers to make sure that we're well adhered, right? So that we're going to move this panel and get it up on the wall.
Okay. So I have my mark, my tile line, and that on 3, Randy, we're going to go up and over, okay? Do you want to go ahead and move this sawhorse as soon as we get over?
Rob, if you grab that sawhorse, I'll grab this one.
All right, so on 3, 1, 2, 3, up. Let's walk it forward. Bring the legs, I'm going to guide you. Bring it forward. Tilt up. go over towards you, right there.
What they're doing is they're eyeballing it along the lines there. They're communicating as a team, and they're hovering the panel before they place it on the wall. They want to get it lined up before they embed it into the wall.
Right there.
Now, they've done that. They're making some fine-tuning adjustments, and they're not pushing on the panel. They're not pushing in anymore. They're using the tool as a handle to shift that panel around gently, right?
Good.
They're adding a couple of spacers. An 1/8-inch spacer is what's specified for this job, an 1/8-inch space, a grout joint. So they're adding that in. I didn't talk yet about those lipid tuning devices. Did you see those lipid devices that were already in place? We installed those yesterday when we set the panel yesterday. Now that part of that lipid system is already in place. And what Lupe is doing now is he's got that beat-in paddle. Could you show us that paddle, Lupe? That's a heavy-weighted paddle. It's got some heft to it, and he's bedding that panel right there.
Normally, we would not have a wall that moves like this.
Not normally. Well, sometimes you do. So we've got a little bit of a challenge with our wall.
So I have to beat it in right down the middle of that line where I was combing the mortar before I release the suction cup system. And I want to make sure that my tile, it's actually fully embedded before I take this out. So
okay,
we
looks
be good?
great. Yeah, that's awesome. So Lupe's bedded the spine where we troweled, and that's pushing the air out, out. All right? Now, there's a little bit of a lever here. We're releasing the suction. Okay, got that one? I've got my side.
Yep.
Okay. We're going to bring this Lupe over to the rack.
All right.
Storage
So
rack.
let's set the leg down. Want to tilt that way?
This way here.
Grab.
Got it.
And up.
Beautiful. Thank you, Rob. All right, now what's going to happen, Randy's going to stiffen up our wall for us.
Just one more.
So now you're going to see Lupe take that beat-in paddle, and he's going to continue working the air out from under that panel. So that air is moving out of those ridges we very carefully troweled, right? We very carefully flattened our substrate. We very carefully selected our mortar. We selected the right trowel. We mixed the mortar correctly. We applied the mortar correctly. And now, having done all of that properly, Lupe is bedding the tile using that weighted beat-in paddle. And he's going in a pattern that shifts the air, forces it from that center spine ridge out to the left. He's working it out to the left. Then he's going to work it out to the right, and he'll work it out to the right. This is not a job for the flunky on your team. This is the last step in a very critical sequence of applying that panel and installing it. There's a couple more parts that we want to show you, and we've got just enough time to finish this up. It's looking really good, guys. Yep. What Rob's got in his hand right here, you see this red thing? This is a tool. Go ahead and turn it on. Right? It's a machine that oscillates, it vibrates, and it's got a suction cup on it too. So Rob is going to be able to suction it to the panel and turn it on, and it's going to vibrate that panel, and it's going to shake, and it's going to transfer that shaking down to the mortar underneath it. And that mortar, do you remember me saying it has this thixotropic property? So that shaking is going to vibrate the molecules in the mortar, and they're going to flow together. And they're going to flow together into those ridges that Lupe isn't able to get with this tool that he's using. Makes sense, right? It's all part of a system. Now you can see our spread line. Do you see how we overspread to the top about an inch? We overspread to the left about an inch. That ensures that we have full coverage all around that panel. Now, yesterday, we set that panel to the right. We did everything exactly the same that we just did right now. And because of that, we're going to end up with a lippage-free installation. We held the trowel at the correct angle. We used the same mortar. We made sure all of our conditions were identical on both days. That is going to enable us to set that panel without lippage right through.
Go ahead.
Okay, here we go. So Lupe, when he was using that paddle to beat it in, you probably noticed that he stayed 2 to 3 inches away from the edges, right? Because if he would have beat in the paddle at the edges, it would have pushed out more mortar, right? That mortar was actually pushing. We didn't want to force that mortar out because we still need it there. We just need to collapse the ridges. So this tool that Randy's using right now is doing that last fine-tuning detail of collapsing the ridges. He's going to be able to especially concentrate on the grout joint between the two panels and work it so that it's nice and flat, right? No lippage between the two. Our standard, that ANSI A108.19 standard, it tells us, it's the only standard we have that tells us that we have to use these lippage tuning devices. So what they've put up there, are you guys familiar with these things at all? You've used these? There's multiple varieties, and we're just happening to show this one today. Yesterday, when we finished that panel, we installed this piece. And we took this part and we slid it under the edge of the panel, right? And we embedded it in the mortar. And we spaced them about every 12 inches, a little more than the width of the trowel. That allowed us today to be able to miss this part that's hanging out. We didn't catch on it as we were troweling. And you need one about that far to take out the lippage along that distance. So now, after they get it set up, we'll be able to go and put the cap on. And this cap ratchets on top of here. Let's see if I can, right? Okay, goes on like that. And what happens with these tools, the cap will actually push down and it'll align the two panels so they're even. Some people think that these pull the panels up and out of the mortar. No, that's not how they work. They're pushing the tile or the panel into the mortar. One of the elements, when you select a lippage tuning device for installing this material, I want you to select one where this cap is removable. This one happens to be removable. It can be removed just by sliding it off like that and pulling it back apart. Why do you want to remove this thing? Well, as they're installing it, you'll see that when Randy was vibrating that center part and that mortar started to flow, it started to flow up and into the grout joint. We want to take a little brush, that Randy has right here in a red bucket of water, and he's going to clean up that mortar right now that flowed into the grout joint and around this lippage device. We're going to that extra detail to do that right now. We want to remove the cap of the tuning device, clean up the mortar that came up during that vibrating process, because we don't want it to cure overnight. Because if it cured overnight, we're going to send our helper in with this device, right? And cut that cured dried mortar out of there. And what's our helper likely to do? Chip the panel.
Mark?
Slice and cut it, right?
Yeah, so one of the advantages of this system is that I already locked this one in place. We're very good. We do not have any lippage here. Did you mention the tolerance on the lippage? I might have missed it.
I did not.
Yeah.
So the tolerance on the lippage for human error, the human error tolerance for installing tile that meets that ANSI standard, that A137.3 standard, that A137.1 standard, tile that's manufactured and all these other things that meet the standards that we install, the tolerance is a 32nd of an inch. 32nd of an inch. That ain't much. This device is designed to take out that last little bit of human error that we're allowed and hold it in place while it's curing. That's all this is designed to do. This is not designed to correct for a substrate that isn't flat. It's not its job, none of these devices. How are you guys doing there?
We're doing good, Mark. We're making a lot of progress. So here, again, you know, we want to make sure that we get all the mortar off of these tiles because we do not want to have to come back the next day and scrape any thin set. That could actually, we can chip the tile, we can break it, we can scratch it, and there's actually no kit to replace this. So if we go ahead and chip this or break it or scratch it, we may have to replace the entire panel. So what Randy is doing right now is very critical for this to be a successful installation. In this little gun here, it's got little numbers, so the higher the number, the more pressure you're gonna have. You know, we wanna keep it in a low number because basically we did all the process right, the embedding, the orbital sander around the perimeter, so we're pretty much within our standards right here. So all I'm doing is just locking up the lipid control system so that it holds the two tiles together, so when that mortar dries, of course the mortar is gonna shrink a bit once it cures, and it's gonna bring the two tiles back down together instead of one and the other.
Perfect. Absolute excellent description. So these guys are finishing up. If we were to install a lippage device for tomorrow over here on this end, we'd put it in right now, slide it in, lift it out, pull it towards the panel, boom, we're ready to go to start tiling tomorrow.
So what we
Guys,
did
you have
yesterday,
anything else to add?
Yeah, so what we did yesterday, for those of you that were here yesterday, if you notice, the legs, the little strap was on an angle. And the reason we had it on an angle was to allow Randy to get back there with the notch trowel close enough to the other tile and be able to get the thin set under the little leg so that we get 100% coverage the entire time. The other thing that we did yesterday was we stretched the space in between each lippage control system. We went from 11 inches to 14 inches so that we could actually get the trowel all the way up to the tile and be able to get you that mortar coverage required that you wanted.
It worked very well.
It worked great. So basically that will be the end result.
Who has questions? Yes, sir. One question. How do you remove that device, Lupe?
Okay, so that device we have right here on this little gun. I don't know if the camera can catch it. Where are we going? This way right here. All right, so right here, I have numbers here. And this little numbers, I think he's trying to get it. Yeah, right there, I'll put it this way. So right here, it's got some numbers. There's a 1, a 2, a 3, and a 4, and an S. So we're gonna set it at the S. I'm gonna go ahead and pop one out so you can see. I'll just basically put it here. One snap is gonna pull that one out.
So
and I'm gonna pull out the one in the middle. I'll just go ahead and put it there. Keep kicking to it, and it's gone. Okay? So that's basically all it takes. Clicked it out. I can reuse this again.
Great question.
All right?
Any other questions?
That's a good question. We do not want to kick it. If we were doing the floor, I'm sorry. The worst thing we could do is kick it or use a push broom because that could chip the edges of the tile. Yes?
I'm sorry, we can't hear you? Yep. What he's asking is, what if the surface behind there isn't flat, right? Did we apply enough mortar to make up for the unflat substrate surface? The standard for tolerance for the surface preparation before we install this panel is 1/8 of an inch in 10 feet, from the high spot to the low spot in 10 feet. When we get our surface that flat, that mortar, that amount of mortar will be enough to take up that amount of variation. No more variation than that. That's the math. You have to prep that wall.
Yes.
You have to prep that floor. You must.
Yeah,
Great question.
Earlier they did a presentation on patching on that wall right there. That's basically what you have to do. Yeah.
Any other questions? All right. Lupe, I want to thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you very much.
Randy, I want to thank you. Where's Rob?
Where's Rob?
Rob, come out here, please. Rob's busy working. He's not in there. Oh,
All
Guys,
right.
please
Thank
do
you.
me a favor. Where is he?
There he is. He's coming now.
Oh, guys, please do me a favor. You've been a great audience. Please put your hands together for Rob and Randy and Lupe. Didn't they do a great job?
Mark.
What a tremendous team.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very
okay?
much.
Thank you.
Thank you
Good job,
very
Mark.
much. You guys are